I live in Michigan, and I am a mother to 3 amazing children that I love. And I work my own business that I created because of necessity, and it's turned into an absolutely amazing experience. I was headed to a second job. I had just finished my first job for morning shift, and then I was headed to a second job at a horse stable. And I was waiting to turn onto a side road because there was cars coming toward me. And so I was stopped in my lane, just sitting there waiting. I hadn't seen anyone behind me until I had just glanced up in my rearview mirror. I was about to turn, and I saw a truck directly in my rear view, and that's when it all happened. So it was quite the experience with that. And as I glanced up to look before I turned, this truck was literally right behind me. I had like 0.2 seconds to think through what was about to happen. And I had this realization that they're not stopping. And so right after thinking that, they just rammed right into the back of my car and launched it about 40 yards to 50 yards. So when I had been pushed into the oncoming traffic lane, there was a semi-truck coming toward me, and I realized it was jackknifing, trying to stop from hitting my car. And at that point is when my memory blacked out, right as it was about to hit my car. The next thing that I remember was, it was very much an out-of-body experience of, I didn't have a physical form. It was very calm and relaxing. There were no worries. It was just kind of this in-between limbo state of physical and not physical. It was just like there. It was very peaceful. I remember it feeling warm and comforting in some way. And it felt like it lasted quite a while. Like it was just a state that I was in for quite a while is how it felt. And then from there, I dropped back into my body. But when I dropped into my body, I was on the side of the road, in the ditch. So the interesting part about this is that there's no realistic way that I could have ended up there. The doors in my car were closed, the windows were closed and were somehow not shattered from the impact. I didn't have any airbag in my car from my memory of it, so nothing deployed to help me in that situation. And logically speaking, there's no way that I should have ended up outside of my car, because I would have ended up outside of my car on impact, right? Like I would have gone through the windshield or something. But I had my seatbelt on also. So I was in this limbo state of nothingness and just calm, peace, serenity, and then all of a sudden I'm dropping into my body in the ditch that was about 15 feet away from my car.
Our Today video sponsor. Until now, depression was considered incurable, lasting forever and helping big pharma and psychiatrists make hundreds of billions every year. This was intentionally done so depressed people could be milked forever. However, as Trump has decided to change the very status quo, the spillover effect reaches the healthcare industry as well. And we are not just speculating. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has just been appointed as the new Secretary of Health and Human Services in the Trump administration. And we all know RFK Jr. specializes in what he is passionate about, healthcare. Judging by the already announced appointments and judging by Kennedy's own words, it is our personal opinion that making America healthy again will be a top presidential priority. And we know from RFK's News Nation town hall that he is overwhelmingly positive about the potential of psychedelic treatments. But what is this treatment, and how can it make something that was earlier considered chronic as treatable? Listen to what the experts say about it.
The difference is that the psychedelic helps open a portal into deeper understanding, into deeper feeling of connectedness with self, with others. That's something that antidepressants don't do.
Instead of maybe numbing or just decreasing symptoms, we're seeing actual healing occur.
And in psychedelic therapy, CYBN, being traded under the ticker CYBN on the New York Stock Exchange, is the leader. Listen to what the company's CEO, who has over 30 years of experience in healthcare, said which can make his company a personal favorite for Trump's healthcare sector.
It's a paradigm shift, moving away from treating daily signs and symptoms of depression, moving more towards attacking the underlying cause and then changing the course of disease, which they'd never been able to do. Absolutely a psychological dimension, and patients going back and connecting with their past selves, their past traumas and experiences as well.
That's why we are calling it the Republican of the healthcare industry, which will bring revolutionary changes. Both Trump and Kennedy agree upon and live by the fact that the new face of healthcare and dealing with mental health must be accessible, simple, and easy. Between Elon Musk's and Ramaswamy's Department of Government Efficiency and RFK's mission of helping tens of millions of Americans to get on the high road, we are very bullish on psychedelics. It's because other than this, existing products are far inferior to the ones that are in the development stage from CYBN. It's unbelievable, but 100% of participants were responsive to treatment, and 71% of participants were in remission at 12 months after just 2 16-milligram doses of CYB00, the drug being developed by CYBN. And this drug is passing regulatory hurdles with flying colors. But why are we telling you this? Well, CYBN is the first full-fledged Trump-era stock that will dominate instantly after Trump's inauguration. Consider it the Bitcoin of 2013. But before trusting, you have to know about numbers. CYBN's market cap is $240 million, which is lower today than the total sum the company has raised from major institutional players, which is $300 million. In other words, the company is destined to reach its original worth, rising to $300 million. And after that point, then the company will begin to grow. Imagine those who would invest in the company now and the percentage of profit they will pocket. But it gets more interesting. CYBN has more than $150 million in cash in the treasury, and the company is led by a team that are pure geniuses and wizards in the healthcare industry, having 300 combined peer-reviewed publications as their contributions to healthcare. But how will CYBN grow under Trump's administration? Besides Trump and his health secretary, Trump's right hand, Elon Musk, is on board as well. As recently as this July, Elon Musk continued to educate and inform his ex-followers about the need for innovative psychedelic treatments, and we believe that CYBN could be a major beneficiary of what might come next in American healthcare.
As of now in the industry, psychedelics, especially psilocybin, are already administered with great success to patients suffering from depression. But the current products require frequent visits to the clinic, year-long treatments, and seemingly no end to it. CYBN changes that completely, bringing a revolution. The clinical trials have shown promising results after 2 intermittent doses, 3 weeks apart. Patients report sustained results. When I look at this from the government's perspective and the frequency of visits that the present ways of treating depression and anxiety are treated, the costs to the system are enormous. And Trump wouldn't like that. He would naturally go for CYBN and perhaps mention it in one of his speeches. With CYBN, there will be no more chronic mental illness, which lasted years. The cured people can resume being positive members of society and a source of joy for their families. According to the World Health Organization, about 280 million people have depression in the world, offering an addressable market for CYBN. Not only does CYBN get an opportunity to grow, but also addresses a problem, serves humanity, and makes the world a better place. We could be on the verge of further decriminalization, depending on the speed at which Trump's administration can work. Not only that, but CYBN can allow war veterans to come out of their depressions and trauma. As you know, both Donald Trump and his vice president, J.D. Vance, appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan is the world's top podcaster, and in the 3 hours conversation with Mr. Vance, Rogan goes on a 2-minute emotional plea for help and explains to the future vice president why veterans of the U.S. Army, who are asked to engage in combat, risk their lives, protect their brothers in arms, and suffer from trauma, can't access psychedelics, which, as Rogan says, has already helped Navy SEALs, like Sean Ryan, who has the #2 podcast in the world today. The voices of reason are speaking, and we believe this administration will do much in paving the way for innovative psychedelic treatments in controlled and supervised environments for medical use for veterans and perhaps the general population. This is the reason we are so bullish on CYBN, which has raised tens of millions of dollars at $16 per share and trades below $12 per share. The results speak for themselves. No competitor has been able to prove such strong positive results 4 months after administering only 2 doses. Even patients see the difference within 2 minutes instead of waiting for months and sinking in more anxiety. Listen to what CYBN's CEO said about that.
Drugs like Prozac and Lexapro, these Zoloft that many people have heard of, with those treatments, typically you see about a third of patients finding remission after about 6 weeks or so of daily dosing. And of course, patients that end up taking those treatments for...
As of now, CYBN is ready to begin its drug's clinical supplies manufacturing. 30 study sites have been selected to see the drug's impacts. Already this drug is doing wonders, as CYBN's CEO said.
This is a synthetic, modified version of psilocin. Psilocin is the active agent in psilocybin. We've modified this molecule through a process called deuteration, where we selectively substitute certain hydrogen atoms on the molecule with deuterium or heavy hydrogen. And the impact of that has been to create a novel molecule, but it also appears to improve the efficiency of psilocin, improves the stability of psilocin, and seems to improve potency too. We're seeing effects at lower doses than we had anticipated.
There are transformational moments in life. Research it and conduct your own independent due diligence. Do check out the link of the website in the description below.
I do not know at all. That part of my memory is entirely blank. I remember everything after dropping back in and before the semi-truck would have hit my car. I don't remember that little part of how I ended up outside of the car. I walked away from the accident. I was able to walk, but I had a compacted spine by about 2 inches, and then I had a dislocated shoulder that was partially torn. And a massive concussion, but I still remember what happened during the accident. So it's, I feel like there was some massive form of divine intervention in that whole situation. So I was leaning on my car and got around it and then ended up on the other side of the road and I remember collapsing on the other side. And the lady who hit me, I remember her being frantic and seeing me drop over there and come to try to help. I was not in a state of wanting to be around her. In particular, I remember her saying that she was talking to her mom on the phone. She didn't see me and she was crying and she was super upset, and my body was very painful, so I didn't want anybody to touch me. But then there was some EMT from EMS, from the construction site, who had seen what happened, and they rushed over to me and essentially carried me into one of their pickup trucks and held my head really still before the ambulance got there because they thought I probably had fractured my spine. It was quite a crazy day. It was like, thinking back on it, it feels overwhelming, the amount of peace and serenity and connection that I was feeling. But at the time that I was feeling it, it just felt natural. And it was, the best way they could describe it is how people describe the overarching source energy of the planet, where it's everything is connected, right? And that's really how it felt, is that there was a connection to everything and everything was one, all in the same. And it was so incredibly serene and peaceful and comforting, and just this overwhelming feeling of love for everything. So unconditional love. But there was no visuals to it for me. It was just all feeling and emotion that was coming through. And it was the most peaceful I've ever felt in my entire life. It felt like it went on forever. But then when I got back into my body, it felt like it had only been moments. Time wasn't a thing. It was just, I was there and that was it. And the only thing was that moment. But then when I had gotten back into my body, it felt like a flash of time. But still very powerful, like present. it was such a profound experience. I don't know entirely how to explain that feeling of everything being connected and everything being one, but individual at the same time. And honestly, just this massive feeling of peace and ease and no worries or stress at all. That's not something I've ever experienced being conscious in the physical. Yeah, I was rushed to the hospital. They did a MRI, they did a bunch of x-rays, they did testing for neurological testing. I only remember spots of that part. I do remember the ambulance ride was agonizing. They had me so tightly strapped to the backboard because they thought that I had maybe fractured my spine potentially in a few spots that I couldn't move, but I remember it causing such a bad migraine. I was like begging them to take me off of the backboard. But once I got there, it was very spotty memory of the day. For 3 days after, I don't remember a whole ton. I do remember being rushed back to the hospital because I couldn't keep food down from the concussion that I had sustained. It was causing issues. I don't remember what they did once I got to the hospital. But after all of that, when my memory started coming back more fully, I remember that people around me seemed very different. They looked the same for the most part, but their mannerisms, how they spoke, their beliefs about me were very different from what I remember prior to the accident. And similar to myself, I had a lot of people telling me that I acted very differently, and not necessarily that, you know, like somebody with acute brain damage would be acting, slurring words, not being able to speak, that kind of stuff. It was along the lines of my mannerisms to them were different. The words that I used, how I spoke, was very different. I had a few very close friends to me, and actually my own family telling me that I seemed like a different person. That it was very strange to them. The fact that I don't know how I ended up outside of my car, the fact that I remember seeing the truck, the semi-truck, at the very front of my vehicle and not stopping, and then landing in a ditch somehow, and the semi-truck had stopped in front of my car in that memory, in what had happened overall in the accident. To me, that seems like what I've heard described as a timeline jump. So I had potentially died in one timeline, but wasn't finished with what I was supposed to do here. So instead of going back to source, going up to heaven, going to where we go in the afterlife, I was pushed into another timeline to continue on with my journey here. And that's the only way that that's the only information that I've come across that explains what I experienced, is having jumped timelines into one where I survived somehow. I don't feel like when you go through an experience like that, the trauma leaves entirely. I do feel like our body, when we bring up these memories, our body remembers, and it definitely affects our emotions. However, I have gained a lot of understanding and a lot of lessons from both of those to move forward in life, and how to handle traumatic situations, and also how to help other people through them. I don't feel at this point in my life I would have had the empathy, understanding, conscious awareness within myself to be able to help other people through severe trauma without having experienced it to that level.